But if you really feel like you can get your ideas out there much more quickly with a partner, like a screenwriting partner, let's say, or someone who's helping you artistically create a project or a t-shirt design or whatever it might be, and one person has a really good business acumen and the other one's more creative, then that's a perfect combo, right? Because like we were saying before, if you're extremely creative and don't have a business side, this becomes a lot more difficult for you.
So it helps you keep that momentum up if you have a partner who's working as hard as you are and has some complementary strengths, or at least is willing to embrace obstacles and work towards overcoming them on a regular basis.
Yep, exactly.
Or if you're sleeping together.
That helps too.
Welcome to the podcast where we talk about the big ideas behind fiction projects of all different kinds. Books, TV shows, movies, video games, nothing's off limits. And be sure to stay away from those like and subscribe buttons. I'm your host, Treat Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Joe Piscopo. So the plan today is to talk about some of the things that we've been into lately, what's been on our lists, and then talk a little bit about some of the creative projects that my co-host has been involved with in the last few years. Maybe give you guys some ideas on things you can do for yourself. What's been on your list?
Typically, I've been reading a lot of, personal development type books, business books, but I picked up a spy thriller just recently by Daniel Silva. It's called Portrait of an Unknown Woman. It's really interesting in the sense that it takes place in the world of art and really high-priced art. It's about a retired spy, and he is now a restorer of fine art. A woman's murdered, and this woman is trying to figure out the provenance of this really famous artwork, trying to figure out whether or not it's a forgery, and if it has like what they call provenance, so like where the actual piece of art has come from through the centuries. And that's one of the big things in the art world that tell you whether or not an artwork is real or not. And they also do scientific analysis, etc. But it's not your typical spy thriller, because this one is all about trying to break into a forgery network. So there's a large group of forgers, or a network of people who are forging these artworks, and they inflate the values of artwork, even though it's not actually legitimate. They buy and sell art. They push this art into museums. A lot of times they're tricking the museums themselves into thinking that this is actual real art. And one of the interesting things in the book that they mention, I haven't verified this, is that 20% of artwork in some of these museums is actually forged. But the forgeries are that good. So I found this book really interesting in the sense that, this is such an unregulated industry, this buying and selling of fine art. And I just didn't realize it was to this level. Like, there's so many pieces of art that are actually pretty famous that they're not 100% certain if it's by the actual artist.
Interesting. Explain this term provenance, if you would. Is it provenance or
provenance? Yeah.
Provenance.
So it's basically the idea of any type of art. Let's say it's Leonardo da Vinci. Being able to trace from Leonardo da Vinci all the way through the centuries,
like
the
ownership,
yeah, all the way through. So the stronger that is, the more the artwork gets legitimized, because you can trace it back family to family or dealer to dealer. But in a lot of cases, what ended up happening is that these famous artists had other artists underneath them that they were mentoring. So the artist might paint just a little bit of the painting itself, and then have another artist who they were training finish it. Or they would actually paint the entire thing. And then, because the provenance has been lost over time, they can't trace it back to the original artist. So they'll say, it's from the school of, or the trainees of this specific artist, but it's not actually him. So it's really difficult, because in the 1600s, say, or even earlier, a lot of these masters had these basically workshops, kind of like Andy Warhol had his factory of different artists in New York. And they would all be doing different artwork in the style of the master. So figuring out what artwork came directly from the master or from one of his students can be difficult, because sometimes the student would do a piece of artwork and he'd sign his name to it. So there's all of this kind of mystery around really fine works of art, and figuring out who actually did it has a lot to do with how the brush strokes, the type of paints that they used for that time, what type of canvas it was on. And now they're using a lot of really advanced technological equipment to figure out at a very atomic level where this actual paint came from, and if it could have been painted by that artist, and was he known to use that exact type of paint, for instance. And a lot of forgeries, amateur forgers, according to this book, will sometimes leave fibers of modern material in the forgery. And they discover that through this really advanced analysis. Well, they'll find a fiber of like polyester, let's say, in an artwork that was supposed to be painted in the 1400s. So
time machine.
Time machine. That's what I was going to say.
It's such an interesting commentary to me on this kind of cult of personality, this like egotistical, like celebratory view we have of each other. It's not the quality of the art that matters. It's who is the exact person who created it.
Yeah.
Because it's brilliant. It's genius if it was created by this artist. But if it was done partially in the same style by someone else, then it's crap.
Yeah.
Even though it looks the same, right? Ideally or reasonably, the master might have an off day and a student might actually do a better job of creating something in that style for part of a larger piece. And that doesn't matter. Like that's still negative value. So it's not really the art that you're celebrating in that case. It's the individual.
Yeah. It's like a cult of celebrity.
Yeah. Is that like a Western thing? Are there other parts of the world where they're like, well, it's sort of like Sun Tzu's writing. And so we just kind of cram it in there and we consider it part of a larger art of war idea. Or are they like, no, if Sun Tzu didn't say it, then it's garbage?
It's an interesting point you bring up that I hadn't really thought of, that all of these masters, we're all from where? The West, right? We know all the Western masters, but we don't know any Eastern that I know of that are on the same level of, let's say, a Monet or Chagall or Da Vinci, and you can go on and on and on. It's always these Western European artists who are the ones that have these ridiculous prices put on their art, like the Salvador Mundi that sold for, I think, $450 million. Which is
I wonder if that's partly because when Westerners study other cultures, they try to run everything through that same lens of, but like, who's the guy? Like, what's the name? Okay, there's a wall, but like, who built the Great Wall? Like, if you had to attribute it to one person, who would that be? Okay, now we can write a history in English. Without that like singular name of who invented that kind of pottery. Like we need to know who it is, or at least like a tribe, or like, without that, it just sort of doesn't register for us. It's a time period. It's a region. We need a name.
I think it's a big flaw, and I think it's human logic. Right?
Is it human though, or is it like Western culture? Is it like, European and North American culture, or is that just across the globe? Everybody's like, how many clicks in his name?
It's another really good question. I mean, is attribution in other cultures more collective? And is that why we haven't heard of these other masters that I'm alluding to? Because we're only singularly focused on one individual doing it. If it's not Da Vinci, but it was a guy who worked in Da Vinci's workshop that was actually as good as Da Vinci because he learned all his techniques at this particular thing.
And it was a good day for him.
Exactly. But there's no value in it, right?
Yeah, but nobody cares.
A lesser artist.
Right. It's almost a forgery at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this book does a good job of exploring all of these concepts and what it really means for an artwork to have value. And they talk about how it goes in differing degrees. If someone from the workshop or someone who's directly trained by that master, that artwork is going to be significantly less, but not as low priced as someone who's in that same school, but is lesser known. So why the value in the Da Vinci versus someone who painted exactly like him, for instance? I don't know. That's a really good question. And the difference could be millions and millions of dollars, not just a little difference.
Well, and psychologically, the difference in how we value it. And again, I wonder if we're just sort of raised that way in the West, where we're taught to think in terms of who's special. And so we're always looking for that. And then owning a piece of art by a master is a way to be associated with someone who's special. It's like special by proxy or by association. I wonder if that's unique to us or just kind of universal for humans.
Yeah, that'll be a really interesting thing to explore, because you can attach that to a lot of things, right? Specific technologies, or who created PayPal, let's say. It just jumped in my mind. And people think, oh, Elon Musk did that, when it was actually a team of people alongside him that created it, but they're just not as famous. but no one even thinks, who are the other guys that did that? It's just attributed to one person. And I think our attribution seems to go from like one person, maximum two, the co-founder mentality, or those two people, the Wright brothers, when in fact, there was probably a whole team of people that were helping the Wright brothers with their plane, or Elon Musk with Tesla, etc. But that's just interesting. It's almost like we can't handle more than one or two founders or inventors of something before it just dilutes it.
Yeah, well, I think if you're going to talk about like the Wright brothers, for example, it would make sense to take a big step back, look at history, and talk about the culture that produced flight of that type. What were their traditions, or what did they inherit in terms of knowledge and passion for flight and those ideas? And what was the culture in the area that influenced them, or just the culture in the world that influenced them? And how does that make sense? But that's almost too much maybe for people to grasp, or we're just not raised to think that way. Like, what were the key elements in cultural development that led to flight? Oh, and by the way, it was the Wright brothers, but who cares? Asterisks. We only talk about them in terms of how the particular influences came together in those people in that moment, but it's not really about them as a whole. I mean, that's part of the problem we have, I think, in our society, is that when we label somebody special, then all their characteristics that had nothing to do with whatever achievement got them that label, people are confused when those other characteristics aren't also amazing. And maybe it all tracks back to this idea that it's not the art or the painting style that is amazing, or even this particular piece, right? It's not that that's amazing. It's the person.
I agree. It's a very strange thing that we can't take a talented person and think they had a talent for this one thing. That does not equate to the fact that they are flawed, like every other human in all these other areas, most likely. And let's say that obsessiveness that drove them to create that amazing piece of art or technology or whatever, or novel or whatever it might be, is a negative trait. That obsessiveness is negative and affected other areas of their lives negatively. So I remember reading in the Da Vinci biography, and they were talking about Michelangelo, and it seemed like people really seemed to gravitate towards Da Vinci. He was extremely popular in town, very well respected, charismatic, etc. And he was this incredible genius. But Michelangelo, on the other hand, seemed to be a very sour type of character, very jealous. People didn't really resonate with him being around, didn't really enjoy his company. But Michelangelo, what he did, in the Sistine Chapel is incredible, right? But he was a person, right, with flaws. Right. But with Da Vinci, it seemed like he was a lot more well-rounded. So that makes him, quote unquote, better, I guess, in a lot of people's eyes. Like, oh, he was not only this incredible artist, but also this really nice, well-loved person for his time.
So which is probably a serial killer.
Probably a serial killer that no one.
I saw where you're going with that. Yeah. The world's greatest serial killer. You heard it artist. Here, folks.
And artist.
Yeah, and he did art, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because you think of these guys as being kind of great in every sense, like you're saying, but that's normally not the case with anyone who has a single-minded obsession with their art, with their work, whatever it might be.
But there's very little talk about what was the culture? What was the environment? What were the relationships that created this, that provided the fertile ground for the David to sprout up? What was the context? But people are like, no, who's the person? Like, maybe I'll read a biography about that person. But I'm really not interested in a biography about all of the cultural and socioeconomic or sociological influences that culminated, at least briefly, in the creation of flight, or this thing, whatever, the Sistine Chapel, or, early designs for a helicopter, or, whatever, like a complete re-examination of anatomy and biology and, the introduction of the scientific method. Like, what made that click? Because a certain perspective could argue that nobody's like manifesting anything out of thin air. It's all there. They're just, in essence, discovering it, and they're serving as a conduit, a focal point for all these different forces. And then that results in this brilliant book or series of books, right? But we don't really explore the rest. We just talk about the person. It elevates them unrealistically.
The thing that comes to mind is Isaac Newton and his Principia Mathematica, where he created calculus, or where he came up with calculus. And I was reading, I'd never heard this before until recently. And the reason why he was able to do that is because he was locked in his house trying to escape the plague. So he wouldn't leave his house. And imagine when he wrote that book, or that, I think it's a series of books that he wrote, there was nothing else to do for him. He was just locked in his house. So if the plague hadn't come about, would we have calculus now?
Right. And what is COVID going to produce for us?
That's another big one. Right?
More math classes we have to take. That's another argument against precautions. Good job.
Another scientific calculator.
Way to make it political.
Yeah, nice one. And would he have taken the vaccine? He would.
He would have invented his own.
Yeah.
I think if you're not going to take the vaccine, you better hit the lab and make your own, or work on your math textbook.
Exactly.
3 acceptable choices.
Keep yourself busy. Since you're not going to watch TV, I guess you're going to have to do something.
That is a great example, right? So without, if that's true, obviously, without the plague, would those ideas have come together, like coalesce in his mind? And would he have manifested them in a way that resonated with others? And then who knows what prevented that idea from dying? Because so many good ideas die a premature death because they don't catch fire, or they're drowned out by other hashtags or reality TV or whatever it is, right? It just doesn't catch fire. It doesn't connect with people. We live in the information age, and maybe that's part of the problem there is we're choked with too much garbage information. But I think a future generation might look back at this time, might sift through a lot of what might be saved. And wouldn't surprise me if they look back and they say, you cannot spend an hour sifting through information saved from the early 2000s without coming across 10 brilliant ideas, 10 future thinking, forward thinking ideas that we embrace now as just a given. And it's just all there. And you trip over it right and left, but it was just buried.
Yeah.
Or trolled.
It's a really interesting concept. There's so much information that we're creating now on a daily basis compared to, let's say, 100 years ago. You're right. How would you sift through all that information? My guess is that AI will take over. Yeah. But AI will have to be programmed in such a way, or instructed in such a way, to weigh certain ideas much more heavily than others. Because otherwise, how would you what are these important ideas? Because there's so many important ideas that are being thrown onto the internet. There's probably world-changing ideas that are all over Reddit right now that no one's really paying attention to. But how do you actually pull that information out and say, this is actually really important to humanity, and this isn't important to humanity?
You just use upvotes.
Oh.
Done. For my example, it's easier because you have the advantage of hindsight. So you just program the algorithm to look for phrases and terms and ideas that have become like really successful. Let's say 200 years from now or 100 years from now. Oh man, we all realized as a society in the late 2000s that, not late 2000s, the late 20s. What do we call 20s, that?
20s.
20, whatever. So we realized that was a good idea. And then looking back, we can discover how many times that idea was presented and rejected, and why in 2092 it caught fire. Mm-hmm. So we can see going back to like 1992, it's popping up repeatedly, but it's getting like shouted down and insulted. And we can learn a lot about humanity by understanding why the ideas were rejected. And then we can use that information to present ideas more effectively going forward. So you could do it that way, and you could study like what it is that leads an idea that's good to be accepted. But without knowing the future, I don't know how you would do that. I don't know how you'd program a computer to find a good idea. It would just keep coming up with exterminate all humans.
Right.
That's the best idea.
You're wasting my time.
All humans. Get off
You're
the
wasting my time.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, the algorithm would say, I don't even need to search anything. Right. I just went through your photos and the answer is exterminate all humans.
Right. It's like, oh, humans again. Here we go. What do they want now?
So I think that sounds like a really interesting book. Is the spy part of it like fulfilling? Is that interesting?
I think the spy part is interesting. It's not as much action adventure as his typical books are. It's a whole series of books about an Israeli spy called Gabriel Allon. And I think this is 22, book 22 in that list.
All right.
Yeah, and this one's a little bit different because he retired, but he's still using a lot of the same story structure as the other books. So it keeps things moving, but it's more an intellectual type of pursuit in this book. than it is in other ones where there's a definite bad guy who, he's chasing after, he's a terrorist or whatever it might be. This is more about really the environment of the art world and how it allows a lot of these things to happen and how it's self-regulated, which means it's not regulated at all. There's people setting prices for art just arbitrarily. And the more sales a piece of art goes through over time, the more valuable it gets, depending on who it's sold to. So again, to your point, it's almost a celebrity. The provenance part is also, there's a celebrity aspect to it too. Was it auctioned off at Christie's to this specific person? Now that legitimized it. It went up to this price, but then it was sold to Sotheby's or through Sotheby's at this point in time. That raised it. So it's automatically raising the price of a specific artwork and then creating really an artificially inflated demand.
Scam.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, because the price is just set by the market, but then it's inflated by the people who control that market, the art dealers and the auction houses who are actually at the forefront of like saying, this is the piece, billionaire person A, this is what you should be buying. This is very hot right now. And them saying, okay, sure, I'll pay $10 million for this. And then that person going to another dealer and saying, I have this piece, how much more can we get for it? So they just keep inflating the value of this art over time. No one really knows why. In terms of, why would this artist be more valuable than this one? No, because someone like the Guggenheims has it in their house, So it's just an artificial market.
So it's the Bitcoin of the 19th century.
It's the Bitcoin of now, because the art world still operates exactly like this, where things are just inflated randomly and no one seems to care, and then just becomes a status symbol. I was able to pay 20 million for this artwork in my office, know, and they control the market by bringing certain pieces out at certain times, which is also really interesting. So you don't want to bring out too many Da Vincis at once because you're going to devalue the pieces. We're going to bring out one, and then we're going to try to inflate that price as much as possible. Because imagine an artwork that was sold for $10 million this year, more than likely in 10 years, it'll be sold for $20 million or $30 million. But it's not going to be devalued. How would that happen unless the market was flooded with similar art by the same artist? It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think Disney used the same strategy to sell VHS tapes in the 90s, where they would vault movies. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. But yeah, they would take like some of their classic films, like Bambi, and then they just wouldn't sell it for a few years, so that when they reintroduced it, there was a clamor to grab a copy.
Interesting. Like what they just did, Netflix just did with the Knives Out movie, the Knives Out sequel. Did you hear about this?
No. What did they do?
They gave it an extremely limited theatrical run of 1 or 2 weeks in specific markets, and then they pulled it. And then they're going to release it wider in December on Netflix only. To just tease the market and to try to get the media to talk about it. Like the fact that there was this limited theatrical. So there was a scarcity to it, Right. And they sold all the tickets out, but it was very, very limited. So people were asking, why wouldn't they just expand that release? Because for them, they want to get more subscriptions to the streaming service. But if you set it up as, it was a huge hit in the theater, tons of people did go and see it. You couldn't see it because it was sold out. Then you're going to get more people going to the streaming platform and signing up for that. I also heard that they were trying to placate Rian Johnson to have a theatrical release, even just for a little bit, so that he would continue to work with them.
Is that how you say his name? Is it Rian?
I guess.
I thought it was Ryan. Is it Rian?
I don't know. It's spelled weird.
Well, and also I think that makes it eligible for awards.
Yes.
Or did they change that? Maybe they changed it. I can't remember if they created a category like with the Oscars for streaming stuff, or if they still say it has to have a theatrical run in order to be considered.
That's a good question.
Maybe they took that away. Is the Oscars still a thing? Are they doing that anymore?
It's a lot of questions here. It's a whole other episode, the Oscars episode.
I think we have to wait till it comes out next time to find out the answers.
Now you got me thinking if it's Rian or Ryan.
That's the biggest question, isn't it?
That is a big one. So anyone in the audience that might know.
No one knows. No one knows. If he's listening, which he's not, he's probably deciding right now, should I go with Ryan? Should I go with Rian? Very good.
Yeah.
Anything else been on your list lately? We had a bit of a long gap between recording. Did you consume any other media?
I started watching that show on Netflix Wednesday.
I'm curious about that.
I think it's a really good show. It's still classic Tim Burton. The lead actress is great. It's just a fun show. It's very light, but I think she plays that part really well. And the supporting actors and actresses are really good too. It's pretty enjoyable. You're not going to, it's not a huge intellectually challenging show, but it's fun. I think they did a good job with the casting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So
And I've never watched the original show.
The Addams Family movies?
I haven't seen those movies. Maybe I saw the original long time ago, but I don't remember. Or the show from the 60s or 70s?
It's been a long time. Yeah. No, those movies were huge when they came out.
Yeah.
Is that like the early 90s?
Early 90s, yeah. 1990, I think the first one came out. Then 92 was Addams Family Values.
That's right. Yeah. And it had big hit songs. And
did he direct those too?
I don't know. I think so. Did he not?
It seems like something he would have directed during that time period.
Let's see.
Because that was right around Beetlejuice time.
Maybe not. Let me see. No, Barry Sonnenfeld.
Oh, okay.
Looks like Dave Payne. So
Barry Sonnenfeld did Men in Black, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right. Addams Family, 1991. Addams Family Values, 1993. And then Addams Family Reunion, 1998. So he did do, Barry Sonnenfeld did Men in Black, Get Shorty, one of my favorite. Actually, I really love the TV series. Did you watch that?
No, I didn't. I heard it's very good.
So good. Wild Wild West, everybody's favorite movie.
Yep.
Throw Mama from the Train. Love that movie. Very good. Anything else?
No. I've been trying to do a little more reading than normal. And that's really the only show that I've watched recently besides Dahmer. Which was extremely creepy and disturbing. Again, great acting, and it seemed to really follow the actual case, which was really, really disturbing. Did you get a chance to watch that?
No, I watched a lot of the true crime documentaries. Was it like earlier this year? I went on like a true crime kick. And then I kind of reached my limit when I do that. Like I read Mindhunter years and years ago when the book was out. I was, fascinated. I read the sequel to that. Just really get into it. And then it's like enough, I get a little sick of it. I can only immerse myself in that world for so long before I get a little burned out on it. And Netflix had a couple really good investigation series. I think it was earlier this year where they followed these different cases and it was interesting stuff. But then I said, all right, that's enough for a while. And then Dahmer came out. So I haven't watched it.
It gets a little dark. I like those Swedish, Norwegian crime novels too. But after a while, I got to put them down. For a few months before I can pick one up again. It's just so the flawed detective who's an alcoholic, who's divorced, and it's just like he's about to get fired all the time. And he's investigating these grisly murders, After a while, it just gets to you, especially if you're reading for bed.
John Douglas, the author of Mindhunter, he was an FBI profiler and they did that Netflix Mindhunter series about him. But he talks a lot. I think it was in the second book. Maybe it was in the first one, but he talks a lot about his breakdowns, like where he was hospitalized. He started having panic attacks, right? You can only absorb so much of those photos and put yourself in the mind of somebody who does those kinds of things because they're truly sick. Personally, I think I get more into the reality of it. I think about it as a real thing that happened to real people, and I can only take so much of that before I'm on a path that John Douglas was on, and threatening my own mental health.
After Dahmer, I was like, okay,
yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good for a while. Maybe watch comedy.
I haven't really dived into Dahmer, but I'm sure next time I come around to being interested in true crime, it'll probably pop up unless it's only available on Snapchat. At that time.
It's now on TikTok, so you're fine.
Okay.
You'll see it in 6-second increments.
With somebody like dancing and pantomiming and in front of it, like going by and doing their little cheerlead dance.
And the latest viral top 40 song underneath.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever they got the rights to from the 90s or something. So I have been listening to Master Boot Record. Are you familiar with that artist?
No.
He's an Italian synth metal artist. But he's got a new album out and it's good. It's very good. He does a lot of 8-bit music inspired metal symphonic pieces. So it's a combination of those kind of 3 very different sound sets. So like, for example, it definitely has like a heavy metal influence, and you can imagine what that sounds like with the drums and the guitar and the riffs and all that. But then there's also like 8-bit music, like Nintendo sounds, like Ghosts and Goblins, I think inspired a track for him. And then you've got that sort of symphonic background that he mixes in. He's done quite a few albums. I think my favorites are Check Disc and Direct Memory Access from 2016 and 2018, respectively. But all of his albums have like a computer or DOS sort of theme in the naming. And they also have hidden like messages built into the tracks and the titles. The current album is Personal Computer. So it's available widely and I recommend it.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, I really like that kind of music, like electronic music in general. So this will be an interesting thing to check out.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the ways in which you've found creative outlets and maybe even turn them into side hustles. Do you want to talk about anything first in particular?
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit about Canva and how easy that is to use. So if anyone out there is looking to do anything creative, it's a great platform for that.
Walk me through, like, where does the idea start? Where does Canva come into play? What's it like using it?
Canva has a lot of different elements that you can use and pull into like the main structure. So the main canvas. So you can pull in a lot of different things into the canvas, move those things around, pull in typography. So if you have a lot of different like typography that you like or that you're using, you can go in there, resize things, change the background. You can even do animation, which is a lot of fun. And then if you want to, you can export it out, create t-shirts, which is something that I really like.
So I start with like what? Like an urge to create?
Yeah.
And then I log into this web-based app. Is it web-based?
It's web-based, yeah.
Okay,
and it's free, and there's a paid one as well. But
there always is.
But starting out in paid, you have a lot of different elements that you can pull in to the canvas. So elements could be anything from like photos, graphics, video, like graphical elements of people, let's say, or trees or whatever it might be. So you've got a whole library of that. And you can pick what you want. You simply drag it into the canvas and you start manipulating it. That's usually how I like to start as a creative
sort of like
idea.
Visual brainstorming. So for you, you don't start with like a clear concept and then you use this tool to create your vision. You start with is that correct?
It depends.
Don't do that.
Sometimes
you do.
Yeah, sometimes I do. Like, let's say if I don't have any type of idea, I'll do this whole element thing. So let's say I'll pick random words, say like robot, tree, house, whatever it might be. And it gives you a whole bunch of different elements to choose from and different types of artistic styles, which you then pull into this canvas and then you start playing from there. So I might see something and say, oh, I like this kind of 3D render of a house. What else could I add to it to make it seem more surreal? And then I might type in robot, and then I'll find some type of robot graphic that fits into that canvas. And then I'll say, okay, what colors do I want to start using? So I'll start manipulating the colors of the actual element. I'll manipulate the colors of like the background itself. And then I'll go from there. And other times I just have an idea in my head because it'll be something that I've just seen on the street or a specific saying that I think is kind of funny or interesting. And I'm like, now how can I play around with typography within Canva and see what I can do in terms of turning it into, like, let's say a t-shirt. And we can talk about how you would go about doing that. But I think those are two of the main ways that I use it. And since it's so easy to use, it gives you a lot of ways to be creative without having to learn like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. You can just start right away because it's very intuitive. And there's also a lot of tutorials on YouTube that you can use to actually get started.
So if somebody's walking around and they have like an idea pop into their mind, like some sort of visual idea, or they see something and they think, man, if you just made these changes to that, that would be really cool or interesting, then they can log into canva.com. They can start with like a whiteboard or a canvas. They can start pulling pre-created elements together and adjusting them and turning them around, changing them, until something really comes together that you like. And then you can export that.
Yeah, you can export it. You can share it with somebody as a link that they can actually go into Canva and you could collaborate on something together, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they have a Teams feature, I see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you could download it as a PDF. You can create GIFs. So you can actually do animations within Canva now, and you can edit video. So all these things are really interesting to play around with, and they keep adding features, because what I think the company's trying to do is basically take over the entire graphic design and video editing market with one platform. So they keep adding features to it. It seems almost weekly that they're doing this, which is really, really fun. Because now you can get into video, you can create your own GIFs, for instance. You can create your own social media posts through there. You can do posters, you can do mug designs, you can do invitations. Basically anything graphically that you can think of, you can do with this software, even with the free version. Because it gives you unlimited access in the free version, except for the fact that you don't get a lot of these pro-level features, like pro-level graphics, for instance, from a lot of different artists. Or you won't get pro animations. You'd have to buy them individually for about $1. But I think the actual subscription is well worth it. It's like $180 a year. But if you use it for a lot of different purposes, or you can really open yourself up creatively, then it's well worth it.
I go on there, I design something, I think it's cool, it's original. If it's an animation, how do I turn that into like a side hustle?
I think the animation part would be a little bit more tricky. If you were to do it, you probably want to put that on some type of platform like Etsy. What a lot of people are doing, let's say on Etsy, and I don't know about the animation piece, but I'm assuming there's a way to do it with an animation. They're doing stickers. So they'll go on to Canva, get elements together that would create a sticker, for instance. Say like you want to have a cool saying on there, whatever, like the only way is up, or whatever you want to say. And you can turn that into digital art, which you would then download and then upload into a platform like Etsy and sell these digital stickers through Etsy that someone could then download. And people are doing this in hundreds of different styles that they upload into Etsy and have entire shops dedicated to it.
I'm sorry, digital sticker?
Yeah, where someone would download it and print it themselves with their own sticker paper.
Okay.
So there's something called a Cricut. I think it's Criket.
Okay.
And you can print a lot of this stuff, like more elaborate designs at your house. You can also go on Canva if you want, and you can design your own planners or journals. And then you can download those files and upload them onto a platform like Etsy and have it be a print-on-demand journal.
Oh, I see. So you're not actually making a physical product that you have to ship. You're just creating digital content that people can order. So it's the difference between like a Kindle book, like ebook, versus like a printed copy of a book. So you're cutting your overhead. And then it's the other person's responsibility to buy sticky paper or whatever. And you probably put instructions for that or places to get that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe, I haven't tried it, there are services now that'll do it all for you. So you'll upload this digital file and they'll print the actual book and send it to the end user. So it's not a digital download anymore. It's an actual physical thing. So there are people making a lot of money doing things like, let's say, a cookbook with a journal. So you can keep all your recipes there, and there's a page with the recipe on it, and then you can have your notes page on the other part, or a productivity planner, or anything else. You can also do posters, which could be digital downloads as well. So you have different size posters, and what people that will do is they'll put it on a site called Placeit. And what Placeit does is you upload this poster design, let's say, and then it'll put it in different virtual environments. So it'll look like what it would look like hanging in a room, for instance, if it's a big poster.
Oh, okay.
Which is really, it'll do it instantly. You just upload it and then it'll show it. What I've done is I put my stuff up on Redbubble, which is a print-on-demand service. And it also does the same thing, because I think they have a partnership or an integration with Placeit. Okay. So once you upload a t-shirt design or whatever design it is, it'll put it on, I think it's 30 some different products that they'll print for you and send.
Like what?
directly to your house. Mugs, stickers, mouse pads, hoodies, hats, you name it. Like tons of stuff. Backpacks.
Real exotic stuff. Huh?
Yeah, real exotic stuff.
Trapper
Phone
keepers.
cases.
Oh yeah, that's got to be big.
There are a lot of people doing that now. The tricky part was selling through those platforms. If it's not on Shopify, Shopify is your other option where you would have to drive traffic yourself. The advantage and disadvantage of some of these platforms is, let's say with the Redbubble, I actually made a sale the other day, which was just a t-shirt design, but it was on a hoodie that I had set up within Redbubble. Someone bought it and I get a cut of the total price. It's a very small cut of what the final price is, but they're really good with SEO. So if someone's typing in a t-shirt like car t-shirts onto Google, one of the big first search results would typically be Redbubble.
Whereas with Shopify,
you're driving to your own branded store with your own products only.
But you get a bigger cut.
You get a much bigger cut. Yeah. So that you would do, you'd set up a store with, let's say, a print on demand platform. And what it would do would integrate with your Shopify store. So you'd upload your designs into that print on demand store. It would connect to your Shopify storefront that you would design to your specifications. And then it would do all the fulfillment on the back end for you. So you could take a bigger cut if it was a physical product.
What's the cost? We're talking start to finish. If somebody has, I guess, graphic ideas, if they have images that they can create or that maybe already uploads things they've already made, what's the cost for them to get it to the point you just described?
If you're using one of those services, let's say like a Redbubble, and I know there are other ones, the one that I use, it's just a percentage of what you're going to take. You can set your percentage take home. Let's say it's 20% of a $35 shirt or whatever it might be. So you're going to make $7 on that sale. But you don't have to do any type of marketing whatsoever. So it's totally passive. It's just the designs that you upload. But it all has to do with how good you are at search engine optimization. Basically figuring out what are people going to search for in Google that's going to drive your sales. Because people will go to these, to Redbubble or whatever it might be. They're not necessarily going to be searching for your specific design unless it's something that they're already looking for. It's not very discoverable when you go to the platform because there's just so much content on it. But let's say you had an idea for a t-shirt. You could either design a t-shirt that's like really cool abstract design of a tree, right? So you put those words in, you describe it as such, you put your keyword tags and everything, hoping you're going to get a sale. Or you figure out the searches that are happening on Redbubble already. And let's say one of the big searches is like Wednesday t-shirts, nature, whatever, fern tree t-shirts, something very specific. You're going to do much better no matter what design you have, because someone's already going to have that intent there. Or if on Google, there's a ton of people searching for that design fern tree t-shirt, you're going to have a much better chance of actually selling it. So now it isn't really a creative marketplace as much as it's like, how good are you at figuring out the algorithm in order to get people to buy whatever it is you're selling?
Yeah, well, that's where the marketing comes in, right? So much of what we talk about starts with a creative idea, but along the way, success requires business side, right? Understanding, how people are going to react to your creative ideas and sometimes modifying them accordingly. So what you're saying makes total sense to me. It's just part of the process.
Yep. If you want to go with the pure marketing route where you're just marketing your own products and services, you would take a more traditional approach in terms of having your own storefront. Let's say it's that, treet-shirts.com, then driving paid traffic through social media or through Google ads, or having an email list that you're then creating a fan base around and getting them to directly buy from you. So they're associating your brand with this specific product, as opposed to just letting them go to one of these services where the end result is that the person who creates the design is going to get a very small cut of that, but the end user has a lot of different choices, So you look at it more of as like a branding exercise as opposed to an SEO exercise within a service like Redbubble. But for someone who's just starting out, those services are really good because you can kind of figure out what designs might sell better than other designs. How do I use this, Canva tool? Is this something that I need to outsource to someone, let's say on Fiverr? to just create all these designs for me, and then I can upload them into these pieces of software. But the thing with Canva that's really useful is that you have a lot of choice for the type of products that you can create, since they have so many different templates already. So I mentioned, let's say the planner. So let's say you're in the event planning space and you don't see that there's any type of planner out there for people who are planning an event the way that you want it to look, or maybe there's nothing out there at all. Well, you can always set up your own website, an event planning journal or something, and sell planners to people using a design that you had from Canva, and then a print on demand service for that particular product, and then sell direct to the consumer. Or you can upload those files to one of these services that kind of markets it for you. So you have choices. There are a lot of people with these side hustles now. So they'll do planners, they'll do stickers, they'll do cookbooks, and it all just starts adding up after a while.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect thing for somebody who maybe they haven't studied art under one of the masters. So they don't necessarily have the brush strokes down and the fine motor control, but they can click a mouse and they have a good vision. And maybe even they have a little bit of a passion for creating, visually appealing or practically useful content, I guess is just the most general term for it. Like they're planning a party and it's just easier to make your own invite, or you're trying to get your wedding together. And then you realize like the way you organize it works a little bit better than what you've been told. And so you can put that together. And then, hey, once you're done, why not just sell it? Why not sell the template, put it out there, and you can just take a small cut if you don't really want to do the marketing stuff. But if you get interested, you can dive in and take a bigger cut.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned invites. That's another big thing that people do. Wedding invitations, birthday invitations. They'll use a tool like Canva. They'll create a mock-up of one, then upload that to Etsy, and then give the end user the ability to customize it however they want. They get the order, they customize it on the template in Canva, then they upload that file and they sell that customized file to the end user for their own particular wedding, without really having to change the font or the design, because they know that person loves that design in the first place. So there's a lot you can do in terms of the digital side, which is pretty interesting. And then you can also outsource all of this stuff, like I said, to a service like Fiverr. If you don't want to do it yourself, you have no artistic ability whatsoever, you're just an idea, you can get an artist on Fiverr to design, let's say, a journal for you. Then you can get someone else to set it all up within, like, let's say, Amazon print on demand, so you can sell it as a book or a Kindle book directly to the end user, which is another way to make money.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds like there are a lot of really relatively easy paths to go from a creative idea that pops into your head to something that is actually a real item. Whatever that would be for whatever your idea was. And you can play around with it. You could make money. If you want to do a little bit more work, you could figure out how to make some money. And if you're willing to do a good bit more work over time, you could make even more money potentially if other people like what you created.
Yeah, it's a really great way, I think, to get yourself into online business in general, because you can get your feet wet just a little bit, figure things out. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you want to do this type of design yourself with something like Canva, or do you want to outsource the whole thing and turn it more into, you just running the business side, which is, I think those are two legitimate ways to go about it, depending on what your interests are.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all very accessible and probably stuff you could do in your own free time initially. And if it took off, obviously it would be more time consuming, but probably worth it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anything else about that or any other creative projects that you want to talk about today?
Yeah. I've been working with my wife on our candle business. So that's been a lot of fun, because you've got how to create a brand, how to set up a website. And in this particular case, the brand's called The Stoic. We have 8 different scents and 4 of them are new for this year. And it all started because I bought her a candle making class, and then she started messing around with the idea of creating a candle based on that class. And she got really involved in figuring out what scents work, the type of wax that you would use. So this has been an interesting journey, because in my mind it was always just you get some fragrance or something and pour it into wax, but it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot more chemistry behind it. To actually make it smell correctly. So a lot of the candles that she was making at first, they seemed to smell fine when they weren't burning. But then when you lit it, the scent wouldn't escape.
Uh-huh.
And that has to do with a lot of different things. What temperature you're pouring the wax in, what type of fragrance oils you're using, or essential oils. You have to know that, let's say, essential oils don't smell as much when they're burned, but fragrance oils do. So you need to keep adjusting all of these measurements in order to figure out what the perfect combination is to actually get a candle that smells good when it's cold, meaning cold throw. That's what they call it, or a hot throw when it's burning. There's also other parts of it, right? Like you can't have the flame going up way too high or having it burn out too quickly, making sure you're using the right wick for the right candle. So there's a lot of different factors that we hadn't really thought about because it just seemed like, okay, you just get some wax. And she tried a lot of different scents, buying a lot of different stuff from Amazon and everywhere online until we figured out like what the best brand would be and what type of quality you were looking for in the scent. And that's been a journey to try to get it to this point now. And getting the design right for the labels was another one. Yeah, it's just starting any kind of small business endeavor takes a lot of time and a lot of things you wouldn't expect that would be an issue. Because at first we just thought, okay, we'll get the candle part done really quickly and the branding part will be a lot longer, but they both take a while to get going, you know?
Yeah, well, I've talked to a lot of creatives over the years, and I think something you said there, I'm realizing is something that I've heard again and again from people who have accomplished something with their creative ideas, people who've brought them to realization or sold them, developed them in different ways and seen it all the way through is the unexpected obstacles. You know, I think a lot of people, especially artists, sometimes they have this like brilliant idea. They have this creative image in their mind or sound, you know, whether it's music or something that they can see very clearly in their head. And then trying to make that real kind of pops the bubble and makes it like not fun. But I would recommend that they listen to what you're saying and anticipate obstacles as part of the journey. Like there are going to be a lot of unexpected things you need to learn or overcome or research or get help with, you know, and that's all, those answers are out there most of the time. Other people have run into it and solved it, but you're going to have to learn a little bit in order to continue, right? It's not as easy as sometimes it seems in our own heads.
Yeah. And to that point, trying to get everything to the right point where it looks good. And also that someone's actually going to want to buy it as opposed to just kind of hand labeling. Which you see a lot. You know, people come up with these ideas, they have a great product, but they don't work on the label. It's just some sticker that they came up with from the store when the whole thing with candles or any type of beauty product or home accessory, let's say home goods item, is that it has to look good because people are going to have it in their house, right? You can't skip that step just because it would be faster to get this thing to market. And the other part is getting everything online, the technology part of it. For instance, right now we're not on Shopify, which is something we're going to move into soon, but we wanted to do like a proof of concept. So that's another thing that I recommend, just doing a proof of concept. You don't have to try to sell, 2,000 units at once. You just need to kind of figure out, do your friends and family, first of all, like what you're doing? Would they be willing to order it again? That's another big one. And if we were using a software, it's an app called Cash Drop. And what Cash Drop does is you don't have to pay your, whatever it is, $30 monthly fee for Shopify or get a developer involved in creating the site. You can do it all yourself just through your phone. And it does the payment processing and everything for you, just like a Shopify would do. It doesn't look as good, obviously, but it still gives you enough to know, like, are people actually ordering this? Or would they be willing to order your product? And which one of them do they like the most? Because that's another thing to keep in mind. You don't want to burn all your cash before you even know if it's something that you should keep pursuing.
Yeah, that's a tricky part. Sometimes you run into that obstacle early, but I really like what you're laying out now because everything you've said so far, that's not the case, right? You're not making a heavy financial investment early in this creative process. You can wait till later when you've gotten some proof of concept.
Yeah, and you don't have to create all the inventory at once either. When you have some type of website or some type of catalog or something that you're setting around, even if it's just a PDF. So for instance, the site's been down for a little while because I need to update it. But I was thinking, okay, how do I get people to buy without having to have the site up? So I was like, okay, I'll go on Canva and I'll create a PDF brochure that I can then email or send over WhatsApp to people so they can still order through Venmo. So you need to be like kind of creative when it comes to not just stopping if you don't have that perfect thing ready and set up. And the other thing is making sure that you get really good photos of whatever you're selling, just because it puts you on a whole other level when it comes to people trying to buy a more luxury based product, because you're going to work really hard on something and the materials cost is very expensive and so is shipping. Then you need to kind of raise everything up in terms of quality. And that starts with the photos, even if it costs a little bit of money to do it.
Yeah, that's really the trick, is being really aware of the kind of money you're investing. You don't want to toss money. You don't want to waste your time and your energy. So it sounds like if people are serious about making a living doing some of these things or earning their money back, it's helpful to talk to someone like you who understands the ins and outs of this, or find some resource for that so they can mentally or even literally like chart out a path. Like, this is the rollout plan, and then sort of use that as a framework to prevent them from wasting a lot of time and money. But that's for people who want to earn a living or earn their money back. But for people who just want to create something, it seems like it's much simpler.
Yeah, for people who want to just create something, my advice would be to do the digital route, because your initial investment and your ongoing investment isn't very high. If you're doing digital products or services or files that you're selling somebody, you don't have to worry about the product. When you're doing something like candles or home goods or t-shirts or whatever it might be, you have those shipping costs, and you also have the packaging costs that you have to build into your pricing. So your margins get much thinner because the delivery costs so much more. So if you're really looking to start something, I think as a side hustle, I would suggest doing some type of digital product or some type of service that you can do online. So if it's some type of consulting service or some other service that you can provide, let's say like running someone's Facebook ads or Google ads, because you don't need an office. You don't need to ship them anything. You don't have employees. You can just do it and have a really high hourly rate that you can charge.
So if somebody wanted to make one candle, they had this idea in their mind of like the perfect candle. They would have to, if I'm following you, they'd have to start by researching the candle ingredients. They'd have to figure out for their idea of, let's say it's a scented candle or it looks a certain way, how that's done best. They would probably have to order different versions and experiment multiple times. And they'd have to have some sort of like molding, or how do you pour a candle?
You just pour it into the vessel, whatever the vessel is. So if it's like a jar.
So you'd have to buy that or make that.
You'd have to buy that.
Yeah.
More than likely. Making it, I think, becomes a little more complicated because you have to buy the molds, and then you got to figure out how to use the wax within a mold and join it together. And it'll be much easier just to buy it. But yeah, you need to figure out what type of wax you're going to use, what scents are going to work, because there's different qualities of scents, and some smell better than others. And the big issue is like when it burns, it's going to burn evenly. And is the scent going to be strong enough for someone to actually like continue buying it? Unless you don't really want it to smell all that much, which kind of defeats the purpose. But it's a lot of experimenting. Yeah. So,
it sounds like it. And that costs money.
That costs money. Yeah. For something like that, you got to invest. You're going to have to invest. And then on top of that, you're going to have to think about the branding. What's the label going to look like? Are you going to design it yourself?
Well, if you're going to sell it. Yeah. If you're going to
sell it.
Correct. But so just as like a creative project, making a candle, you're probably better off just taking a class. Right.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
maybe they give you some freedom to make what you want to make, and you can do that. But if you actually want to start a business with a lot of these different goods that you're referencing, then it's going to be a lot of buying and trying.
Yeah. And you're just going to have to accept the fact that these things cost quite a bit of money if you want a really high quality end product. Because to make a really cheap version, you can buy, the cheapest fragrance oils you can find, paraffin wax, which is cheaper than soy wax or beeswax. So you're going to have a cheaper made product. And that's a big difference, between making something high quality or more luxury than something that's more just doing it for fun. But taking a candle making class would probably be the best way to start.
That's probably true for a lot of creative ideas. It's like, just find a class, or find an existing recording studio or, whatever, go drink wine and paint place and mess around. But if you have a more serious vision or you're past that stage already, then be prepared for some work, right? It's a methodical approach, which doesn't often appeal to artists to do things methodically. And you've got to really stick with it when you run into obstacles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with all of these business ideas or creative ideas, it's just getting momentum and keeping that momentum up, even if it's really small steps, even if it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Just doing one thing a day is much better than thinking about it and trying to make the perfect product, offering the perfect digital download, or like the example I was giving earlier about we don't have Shopify yet. Well, what's an alternative to that you can do faster or cheaper or both, just to test the proof of concept? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what matters the most. Being able, if you're going to sell, for instance, or if you're going to do something creative, you have to be satisfied with what you've created in the end. And for the business side of it, like, how can you get that to the market as fast as possible and get feedback? Do they like it? In the case of candles, do they like what vessel it's in? Do they like the smell? Would they change something? What do they think of the label? Would they change that? Do they want more customization on the label? Is that something that people are asking for? And then you can go into step 2 or 3, which is making a much more professional looking website that costs more money, spending more money on advertising, spending more time on social media, pushing it out. But at least the basics are there. Like, this is a good quality product that I want to get out to market without doing what a lot of people end up doing is, I have $25,000. Let's make the greatest website ever and then hope that people are going to buy it,
Do you think it helps to have a partner?
Yeah, I think having a partner can really help, but I think it'll also be detrimental depending on who the partner is. Because I think if one person's working a lot more than the other, there are going to be issues. If their vision for the end product is totally different, there are going to be issues. So if you're very self-motivated, then taking on a partner isn't something I would necessarily recommend you do, but it might be better to get employees or contractors who are kind of fulfilling the role of a partner. So let's say you're great at the marketing piece, but you're not so good at the sales side, or you're not very good at web development. Hiring a contractor to do those things would be great, because you still keep ownership of the company and you're just paying a salary or a fee for a particular service. But if you really feel like you can get your ideas out there much more quickly with a partner, like a screenwriting partner, let's say, or someone who's helping you artistically create a project, or a t-shirt design, or whatever it might be, and one person has a really good business acumen and the other one's more creative, then that's a perfect combo, right? Because like we were saying before, if you're extremely creative and don't have a business side, this becomes a lot more difficult for you.
So it helps you keep that momentum up if you have a partner who's working as hard as you are and has some complementary strengths, or at least is willing to embrace obstacles and work towards overcoming them on a regular basis.
Yep, exactly.
Or if you're sleeping together.
That helps too.
I knew it. Awesome. Well, that sounds really useful. Anything else? Any other last words for would-be business moguls?
Yeah, I would say Udemy and Coursera and YouTube are the 3 big resources that you should use really frequently in order to kind of speed up your time to market for whatever you're trying to do. You can do all your research through those platforms. And if you want more of a class, Udemy, Coursera are great for that. And now YouTube is actually offering a lot of classes. There's actually, for Canva, I know there was a Udemy class, and the 2 instructors on there were so good at getting people to try Canva that Canva actually hired them for their official YouTube channel. So anything you want to learn about Canva, you can find through the Canva YouTube tutorials, anything.
That is something I definitely underutilize. I have a habit of banging my head against the keyboard. Whenever I try some new software or website, I try to tackle it. I try to figure it out. It all looks sort of deceptively user-friendly. So I think I'll just watch maybe their little brief tutorial video for 30 seconds, and then I'll just mess around with it and learn as I go. And I'm realizing that just does not work. There's too much I'm missing out on. The learning curve is too long. So I'm able to produce something, but I don't like it. Whereas if I probably took some of these classes, I'm assuming I would go into it more knowledgeable, even if I just did a 15, 30-minute class or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to that to the YouTube class or doing a Udemy course. I did a Udemy class on Canva, which was extremely useful, even though I thought I knew Canva really well. There were so many shortcuts and tricks and ways to use it that I'd never even thought of, and buttons that I didn't even know were there that they were explaining. The same thing with something like Audacity. Like figuring out how to do the sound filtering on Audacity. Yeah, you can start clicking around, but it takes forever to figure out like what are the right settings for whatever you're trying to do. Or you can go on there where some Audacity expert has set up 25 different videos from start to finish of how to use Audacity, and it's all categorized by exactly whatever problem that you're having on Audacity, right? So
yeah, much quicker.
Yeah.
And less frustrating.
Much less frustrating, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit old school in that I'm used to learning in person. And it's hard for me to absorb information via video because it doesn't feel like I can interact. Like when they start talking and they're going in a different direction than the question that I have in my mind, not being able to like raise my hand and stop the conversation and say, right, but what about this real quick? And then they answer that. And then I'm, in a classroom setting, I get that answer and then I'm able to like plug back in. And continue to absorb information very quickly. But when I try to get like Audacity training over YouTube, I'm so fixated on what it is that my next question is that I end up skipping around trying to find the answer. And if I can't get it, then I get frustrated and feel like it was kind of useless. So I think maybe some people who have now grown up being taught online are probably going to have a little bit of an advantage with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different way to learn. But what I like about it is that you can pause the video and just rewind it. What was that button you clicked? What was the setting he had there? What were the steps to get to this point? And that seems to be much quicker than me jumping into the help and then reading about it and then try to put the steps into practice.
Yeah, it sounds like a skill that you've developed.
Yeah, I've just gotten used to doing it so much for very specific questions that it's just really convenient at this point.
Well, those are some good resources for that, for approaching things that way. So I'll use those and hopefully things will be smoother going forward.
Cool. Yeah, I hope you use it.
Yeah, there's a lot of great tips in here. I appreciate it. I think for anyone listening who has creative ideas that could possibly fit into using any of those tools, they might find that it allows them to either finish creating and or maybe sell it.
Yeah, that's
maybe
it.
Make some money.
Yes, the selling part's become so easy now that there's really not any reason not to try it.
Yeah, that's great. All right, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for getting into that stuff. Thank you for your time today. Anything else? Any other last words from you, my co-host, Mr. Piscopo?
No, I think it was another great show. Informative. It was a long one today, but I hope the listeners got something out of it.
Yeah.
Our ramblings.
I hope so too. And we'll see what we come up with for the next one.
Sounds good.